Hi there. For those who don't know who I am, my name's Rhys Dalton-Morgan, aka the UF Aussie. If you've watched some of my other videos, you'll probably know that I'm deeply invested in reading, researching, learning, investigating, and exploring the UFO phenomenon. What I wanted to do today is something a little bit different. I spend a lot of my time exploring other people's cases, but today I actually wanted to talk about my own experience with the phenomenon. This is something that I've spoken about with friends and family privately, but I felt it important to share so people can have a little bit of a better idea about who I am as a person and why I'm so passionate about what it is that I do with this field. I grew up in a small country town outside of Adelaide in South Australia called Aldinga. My father's family had been relocated from the UK when he was young because my grandfather was tasked with managing the Woomera Test Range, which is Australia's Area 51. I attended a primary school called McLaren Vale when I was young, and when I was 9 or 10 years old, I was in music class. I was sitting in a circle and the teacher was standing in the middle holding a triangle, an instrument, and she was teaching the kids how to play it. Now, we were just sitting there with our legs crossed, listening intently, or playing amok, as you do, and the girl next to me on my left, her name was Adeline, and she all of a sudden leaned over and started intensely looking at the bottom of my right shoe, which was tucked under my left knee. And she said, out of nowhere, "Oh my God, you stepped on a fairy." Now, to say I was shocked and confused was an understatement. I had no idea what she was talking about, but I could see by how intensely that she was looking at my foot that something was there. So I leaned in to have a look at my right shoe, and as best as I can describe, in the crease line or groove on the sole of my shoe, so on the bottom of my shoe in the groove line, there was an all gold humanoid with wings. Now, as I can probably imagine, people are probably saying, yeah, it was probably an insect, it was probably a figurine or a pin. This was the realest thing that I've ever seen to this day. It was so detailed and so organic that I could see the wrinkles in its eyelids. Now, this thing was hairless, it had a humanoid face, it had hands, fingers, toes. It had no sexual body parts, so no breasts or reproductive organs. And the wings were almost like a dragonfly, but in an X pattern. But because of the groove of the shoe, they had been folded back across one another. This shocked me so much when I was looking at it that I almost felt like I was in a trance staring at it, that I took my shoe off and continued to stare at this as close as I could. It was like this close to my face at that point. And looking at this thing, it was obvious that whatever this was, this all flat gold humanoid, it was dead. And the reason that I could tell that is a few months before this incident had occurred, I had found my cat dead on our veranda. It had been bitten by a snake, and it was my first time as a child experiencing death. And when I was looking at this being thing on my shoe, it gave me the same somber feeling that whatever had made it alive at one point was now gone. It had left. And this feeling just sort of washed over me. It completely kind of, overwhelmed me in a sense. And time sort of almost seemed to kind of go out the window a little bit. I'm not really sure how long went by, but I had been staring at this thing for a fair few minutes with Adeline as well, and was digging my finger in to try and get it out. And all of a sudden the school bell rang. It was recess, and the teacher that had been teaching the class, the students started to go out and run out of the classroom, and I was still sitting there in a trance almost looking at this thing, and Adeline actually got up to leave as well. And the teacher said, "Rhys, put your shoe on, I have to lock the door, let's go." And I kind of snapped out of it and came to and was like, "Oh, miss, there's a fairy on my shoe." And she looked at me like I was a complete bloody idiot, but I went to go almost show her that this thing was actually there. So I held up my shoe and say, "Miss, seriously, look, there's actually a fairy on my shoe." And I don't even know if she even looked at my shoe. I can't really recall, but she looked at me and said, "Rhys, I have to lock the door, put your shoe on, let's go, come on." So almost frustrated, I sort of put my shoe on. I was so paranoid about this thing falling out of my shoe in between me and getting outside to where I could take my shoe off again, that I actually hopped to the door. And when I hopped, I was still afraid that this thing would fall out. And I got outside the classroom, which was almost like a portable classroom. There was just a few steps down to the concrete pavement there. But I sat on the top step once I got outside, and I pulled my foot back up to have a look, and this thing was gone. Where it went, I don't know, but I was convinced that it had fallen off in the classroom. So before the teacher had a chance to lock the door, I actually scrambled back into the classroom and started hurriedly fumbling my fingers through the carpet fibers to see if I could find this thing again. And I never found it. This experience affected me so deeply that all I could talk about and tell people from that point onward was that I had stepped on a fairy. And as you can imagine, no one believed me, not even my own family. But the confirmation that it was real was not only through my own experience, but through Adeline as well. She had been actually the one that had originally spotted this thing on the bottom of my shoe. And as a kid, that experience for some reason opened my mind up to the idea that the world was not as I was actually being told. And I would go on later in life to actually have multiple paranormal and unexplained experiences. And very interestingly, they were all actually with other people, whether it was partners or friends. I encountered extraordinary things at different points in my life that I'm not going to go into detail here, but maybe another time, that confirmed to me that I wasn't the only one seeing these things. There were people with me that witnessed these things as well that were completely unexplainable. And I never really had an explanation as to why this stuff was occurring. I didn't really look at the connection with it. I just accepted it as an anomalous event. But the trauma from the first experience with the gold humanoid with wings, I stopped speaking about that because I copped so much shit about that incident. But it wasn't until nearly 20 years later when a strange sequence of events led me to actually doing research about my grandfather and his time at Woomera. And it would come through my own sort of dogged hard work trying to get to the truth of what really happened at Woomera with my grandfather, that I would come to learn that my grandfather had been deeply involved with the UFO phenomenon. Now, my grandfather was a famous and revered World War II fighter pilot ace from the RAF. And he had actually been involved in early UFO investigations with the United States Air Force in 1948, and would later go on at his time at Woomera to actually experience a close encounter UFO himself during the launch of a nuclear Black Knight rocket, where my grandfather was tasked with managing Britain's advanced weapons intercontinental ballistic missile tests. Now, I released all this research publicly through a video, which is my first video that you can see on my channel, but Ross Coldheart then actually got the scientific organisation in Australia called Advena to publish my research article about my grandfather's story. Now, my mother is a senior person, also she has a senior role at an Australian nuclear reactor here. She's not my grandfather's daughter, that's her father-in-law. But when my mother saw the attention or the seriousness of my grandfather's actual UFO connection and what he'd encountered and the documentation that supported this event, last year she felt comfortable for the first time in her life coming forward and sharing her own anomalous experiences. Now, my mother is extremely intelligent and one of the most inspiring people, to me at least, that I've come across. I consider her a real role model, but she's a scientist, so she's very black and white, but very open-minded as well, I guess. But when she sat my father and I down, she spoke of close encounters with anomalous entities, craft, UFOs, and also what you might call an abduction encounter. And this rattled my world. Firstly, because in this period of time where I'd learned about my grandfather and my mother, I had never known in my whole life, no one had ever told me that my experiences had anything to do with maybe my family, if that's the case, but also that they were real. And then all of a sudden I was learning through these very serious people who were, in very important and responsible positions, that they had had encounters with anomalous things almost through their life, especially with my mother. And this actually shocked my father more than anyone. He was completely flustered by what my mother had shared. But the strangest thing of all actually came when I was reading through my grandfather's biography. And this biography of my grandfather's, it's called Tommy Leader. And it's essentially a military memoir. It's a very black and white, factional, unassuming account of his life through the RAF, World War II, the Cold War, and then his time at Woomera. There's a lot of missing pieces to it, but it's quite dry and to the point. There's nothing outlandish in it, except one thing. When I was reading this, I came across an account during his time in World War II in the book that spoke about an incident where he was nearly killed in the Battle of Britain, and a cannon shell had exploded in his Hurricane fighter during the Battle of Britain, and the shrapnel from the glass and the materials had gone into his face. Now, he had his mask up, so it had actually saved his life. But what was written after the account was what shocked me the most. And I've got it here to read so people can understand what he said. Once their doc had cleaned me up and examined me, apparently my face and neck had taken shrapnel from the BF-109 cannon shell that had exploded in the cockpit, and glass from the gun sight, instrumentation panel, and the shattered windscreen. My oxygen mask had saved some of my face. My goggles had been closed up and my eyes exposed. Cheeks, ears, and neck also caught plenty. My good fairy had been with me and saved my eyes. She had probably saved my life. Now, when I read that, I nearly fell off my chair, because not only did I not understand what it meant, or if it was connected to my experience, but it helped me understand that these experiences that are related to this phenomenon that we call are bigger than ourselves. That there is something going on with this phenomenon that is more than UFOs. That it is a broader range of phenomena connected to these experiences. Now, I don't have any answers, and I'm not claiming that I even stepped on a fairy, for example. I don't really know what happened. I'm just telling you my recollection of the account. But what I do know is that there are people all around the world, like myself, like my mother, like my grandfather, who are having these anomalous experiences. And they've been occurring for a long time. And it's really important that we actually start to share these experiences to get to the heart of the truth of what's really going on here. Because I do think this is important for not only ourselves, our self-esteem, the world we live in, science, but also just because it matters. Like it really matters to people that to have your experience actually validated and acknowledged that it really happened. Because I spent 20 years of my life not sharing my experience, this one, because of how much shit I copped, that I was too afraid to ever talk about it again, even though in my eyes it was completely real and this was a lucid, lived experience. If you've gotten this far in the video, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this account. I don't expect everyone to believe me, and that's okay. I'm not asking that. What I'm asking, I guess, from this is if we can start to move forward together and more people can start to share their experiences so we can get at the crux of the matter. Because I do think this is stranger than just UFOs. So if you do have an anomalous experience that's happened to yourself as well, please feel free to share it in the comments below. And thank you again for taking the time to listen to this video. If this video has affected you in any way that you feel important enough, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others. And I hope to be sharing more work with you in the near future. Thank you.